session will feature one presentation of about 30 to 40 minutes, followed by a single Q&A period for our presenters. Our first presenters this morning are Cliff Landis and Allison F. Smith, both from the Atlanta University Center Robert Woodruff, tongue twister, the Robert Woodruff Library. We'll go ahead and let them get started. Thank you so much, both Cliff and Allison, for sharing with us this morning, and I'm going to hand the session over to you now.
Thank you so much, Ashley. We appreciate it. Good morning, everyone. I'm Cliff Landis, and I have with me Allison Smith, and together we're going to be presenting on a project that we've been working on for the past year, which is GaNCH. So to briefly introduce the project design, the goal of this one-year project was to create a publicly editable directory of Georgia's natural, cultural, and historic organizations in Wikidata, allowing for a quick retrieval of location and contact information for disaster response via a website. So the idea for this project actually started in 2018 when I attended the Georgia Archives Institute. I'm very happy to see many of my fellow classmates from the Institute very active in SGA today. The Georgia Archives Institute is an annual 2-week crash course in archival practice. And after meeting so many cool archivists, I really wanted to see a map of all of the archives of Georgia. But after looking around, I realized that none of that was available. So I started looking for directories of cultural heritage organizations in Georgia, and I came across the GRAC Historical and Cultural Organizations Directory. And so GRAC is the Georgia Historical Records Advisory Council. I did a test web scrape of the data in that directory, and I cleaned it up and enhanced it with geographic coordinates, and then uploaded that to Wikidata. When I mentioned this to my department head, Christine Wiseman, she explained that she worked on the same directory while she was at the Georgia Archives. Oh, I'm sorry. You guys are seeing my presenter notes in front of my slides. No wonder I'm reading it so well. I'm sorry about that. Now everyone should be able to see it, so I'll just be looking off to the side the entire time. I'm glad I checked out the chat message. Sorry about that. So anyway, so I mentioned it to Christine Wiseman, who is our department head, who's my department head, and she explained that she worked at the Georgia Archives on that directory. And she said that that data set would need to be brought up to date. And she suggested that we apply for a grant for it, and here we are today. But before we dive into the project, I wanted to give you a little bit of background and context information. So I'm the Digital Initiatives Librarian at the Atlanta University Center Robert W. Woodruff Library. So the Woodruff Library is the lead organization for this project. And our library supports the teaching, learning, and research missions of 4 institutions of higher education that comprise the world's largest consortium of historically Black colleges and universities, or HBCUs: Clark Atlanta University, the Interdenominational Theological Center, Morehouse College, and Spelman College.
A huge thank you to Lyrasis for funding this project through a Lyrasis Catalyst grant. The Lyrasis grant funded my position as a graduate assistant and our web developer, Matthew Stevens. Additionally, team members Jessica Lemming and Alex Dade from the Digital Services Department of the AUC Woodruff Library both pitched in to help us build this tool. We partner with professional and governmental organizations across the state of Georgia and the southeastern United States. Some of our partners provide assistance to NCH organizations impacted by disasters, including HERA, the Heritage Emergency Response Alliance, SURE, the Savannah Heritage Emergency Response, and GEMA, the Georgia Emergency Management and Homeland Security Agency.
So I'm going to give you a little bit of background information about the design of the project. So let's talk about why Georgia needs a tool like this. Well, natural disasters are impacting Georgia at an alarming and increasing rate. In the past 2 years, Georgia has experienced multiple months of flooding rainfall, an outbreak of tornadoes, and multiple hurricanes and tropical storms. And as the largest US state east of the Mississippi, with 159 counties, Georgia has extensive and diverse cultural, natural, and historic sites that preserve and document the unique history and culture of the state. It would aid statewide efforts if our partner organizations could access a list of these NCH organizations both before and after a disaster strikes. For a real-time example of this, you can see the Hurricane Dorian event map used by the Federal Emergency Management Agency to track NCH organizations in the path of the hurricane. Hurricane Dorian struck just a few months into the project in 2019, but as you can see, we shared what little geographic coordinate data we had with FEMA from our coastal counties. And so you can see how our initial data sets were even used in real-time emergency response. So in the past, how would these cultural heritage emergency responders find NCH organizations impacted by disasters? Well, directory information is out there, but it's scattered in different data sets, none of which are publicly editable or geocoded or up to date. And as I said, we started with GRAC's Historical Cultural Organizations Directory, but then we also wanted to add the Georgia Historical Society's Directory of Affiliate Organizations. And we also wanted to add the Georgia Association of Museums and Galleries Directory and the Georgia Public Library Service Directory and several other directories, which we estimated at over 1,500 organizational records combined. We knew that there would be some overlap between the directories, but we wouldn't know how much until we were actually into the project. So while designing the project and writing up the grant proposal, we focused on several principles. Wikidata provides a flexible structure to represent many relationships and repeatable fields, so records are easily enhanced with additional data. Simple edits in Wikidata can be done manually by anyone, allowing for decentralized updates. So there's no need for an institution or an individual owner to grant access to the data for regular updates, thus removing a big bottleneck for those updates. Facts represented in Wikidata are provided with an open license. And so to honor this, we didn't use any copyrightable content from from any of our source data sets, like collection descriptions. And reference links were included for each statement, providing sourced information for verification and to provide direction for future updates. The project was completed using free software, guaranteeing broad access and free implementation. And we made an effort to provide a model for other states by documenting and presenting on all of the processes that we have used. And last, we also designed the project to provide a graduate assistant paid internship to give an up-and-coming information professional practical experience in working with linked open data. And we were very lucky to have Allison join the team. Oh, you're muted, Allison.
Sorry.
Oh, there you go.
Thanks, Cliff. Okay, this is my favorite part. It is our workflow for collecting, verifying, and uploading the data. The software we utilize includes OpenRefine, GitHub, and Visual Studio Code. Wikidata is a free and open knowledge base that acts as a central storage for the structured data of its Wikimedia sister projects. When we were first planning this project, we searched for GLAM organizations in Georgia that have coordinate location information, which only pulled up about 40 results. But if you search by GLAMs in the United States, you get even more results in Georgia. This has to do with how the information is tagged. And this is the type of data we plan on cleaning and updating. We also did this project to find smaller hidden institutions, such as the Georgia Rural Telephone Museum located in Leslie, Georgia. Even though there was an entry in Wikipedia, We did not have this institution in any of our partners' data sets. The best part is including lesser known institutions and adding them to the data set for disaster relief. As you can see from this map, we made quite a bit of progress over the course of the grant. We widened our searches beyond GLAM to get as many relevant NCH organizations as possible. And as of today, our big search for the entire state returns over 1,900 institutions. This search includes things like historic districts that don't have contact information, so that emergency responders can cast as wide a net as possible when doing their helicopter flyovers following a disaster. Beyond the maps, we also make the data available in table format. As we'll show, being able to export contact information in table format helps emergency responders reach out to NCH organizations to see if they need assistance before and after a disaster strikes. First, we start by scraping websites, gathering lists from partners, and creating giant spreadsheets of NCH organizations. We then use free website tools to enrich the organization data with additional metadata like coordinate location and county. Next, we upload each spreadsheet into OpenRefine and matched up organizations to their records in Wikidata. Then we reconciled our fields against Wikidata schema inside of OpenRefine. We have a data dictionary available on our GitHub site if you're curious about how we map the spreadsheets to Wikidata schema. Next, we created references for each linked data triple. So for every single fact we upload to Wikidata, we supply 3 values: the fact, the reference URL, and the retrieval date. By citing our sources with snapshots and timestamps, we are giving folks in the future the ability to trace and update each fact as things change over time. This allows us to track which organizations have dissolved, which allows us to exclude dissolved organizations from our search results. We also captured the reference link using Internet Archive's Wayback Machine. 2 unique things happen when capturing this information. Some websites went down after we captured the information, and during the time we were working on this project, we were able to capture different organizations' COVID-19 information on these websites. By using the Internet Archive's Wayback Machine to take snapshots of web pages where we found each fact, we are able to show evidence of our claims in Wikidata. Then we upload the information to Wikidata. This slide shows the Aragon Historical Society, which we added as part of the testing phase. After the data is uploaded to Wikidata, we perform quality control on each entry to verify that things are correct, especially the location coordinate data. Sometimes getting that coordination located data is tricky, but we try to place the marker on the building itself, since after a disaster, street signs and other wayfinding markers are often damaged or destroyed.
Great, and so now I'm going to talk a little bit about building out the website and some of our outreach and sustainability efforts. So we mocked up our website for testing and feedback to ensure that it met the emergency responders' needs. Here you can see our initial homepage wireframe in Mockflow. Now, Wikidata can occasionally run slowly or be temporarily unavailable. And so to prevent outages during a disaster, our web developer, Matthew Stevens, designed the site to store the query results locally. So the queries are refreshed every night to keep the information on the website up to date with any changes that we make in Wikidata. We have 3 main query types. So Georgia as a whole, individual Georgia counties, and the 8 GEMA regions that the Georgia Emergency Management and Homeland Security Agency uses to divide the state. So the results page displays both a map and a table of the directory information for these NCH organizations. We recognize that the website may be used on mobile devices after a disaster. And so as cultural heritage responders are going to be out in the field, we made sure to give the website a responsive design so that it converts to responsive design with my particular favorite feature, a table that converts to single cell format on mobile devices to prevent users from having to scroll left to right and left to right to read the information. We also provide users with instructions on how to export the tabular data directly from Wikidata to a CSV file so that it can be imported to other systems like WebEOC, which is the Web Emergency Operations Command used at the state level. We're getting a lot of help from our partner organizations to get the word out about the project, including SGA. Not only to their member institutions, but also more broadly to similar organizations in other states. And now that we're at the end of the grant, we have worked with state level partner organizations to begin the handoff for long-term maintenance and sustainability. So HERA, SHARE, and GEMA have integrated the final product into their workflow for disaster response. Galileo, our statewide virtual library, is graciously providing the web hosting. And Galileo and the Georgia Public Library Services, Archival Services, and Digital Initiatives, our statewide digitization initiative, will perform the annual updates. So we've built an emailer into the website so that folks at GPLS and Galileo can send out reminder emails once a year to these NCH organizations. They can use this to request any updates from the organizations for that contact and directory information. If information has changed, the updates can be made directly into Wikidata by student workers, but if the email bounces back, we can look at the organization to see if it's been dissolved. We've also created a submission form on the website so that an organization can let us know if their directory information has changed. This is also helpful for new NCH organizations that arise over time. So if you look on the site and you see that your organization was missing from any of our source data sets, just let us know via this form and we'll make sure that your organization is included in Wikidata. And to make sure that everything associated with the project is free, transparent, adaptable, and reproducible, we've created a GitHub repository which includes everything associated with the project. An example of this is our workflow manual shown here, which walks you through the entire process we've developed step by step, including warnings about some of the challenges we've encountered. The only code that's not yet publicly released is the final website, but that's forthcoming after our web developer, Matthew Stevens, removes any sensitive information from the code.
So we now want to talk about considerations, additional uses, and impacts of the project. So these are some things to consider when working on a project like this. First are duplicates and name variations. Some organizations change names or have aliases that create duplicates. Pay attention to the names and sometimes do a deeper dive into the history of an organization. Dissolved. Due to some of the data sets being outdated, many organizations are no longer in existence. The process to verify dissolved dates include reaching out to the org's contact, newspaper articles, maybe TripAdvisor, and Georgia Registry. But also be aware of organizations that were started in Georgia and have been relocated, or national organizations whose main office is in Georgia. We still capture these records. And expired domains. There are domains that have expired and they've been purchased by other organization. Be careful with working with these expired domains because we found that some domains were purchased by organizations designed for explicit adult content. Another issue we discovered is the challenge of trying to map real-world messiness to the much cleaner data model of Wikidata. The challenge was not only trying to map it, but trying to reach consensus within the Wikidata community on how it should be handled. Municipalities, including things like towns, villages, and cities. The P131 field is the field for administrative territories entities in Wikidata. The P131 field is broad and can cover municipalities, counties, and states. In the Wikidata documentation for P131, it recommends that you only list the single most local administrative territorial entity. Since the field is supposed to be both transitive and hierarchical, cascade upwards like you see on the left. But in Georgia, the borders of municipalities and counties were drawn independently, and about 10% of the municipalities in Georgia exist in more than one county, so they aren't transitive. This means that for our project, we can't rely on Wikidata's cascading hierarchy to be correct when it comes to searching for organizations by county. We reached out to Wikidata community to try and find a solution to this challenge. But after several proposals and over a month of discussion on 4 separate Wikidata pages, no consensus was reached. So for our project, we explicitly declared municipality, county, and state all in the P131 field, with the hopes that consensus on a solution can be reached in the future. In the meantime, our queries are functioning well, and we figure it's better to have too much well-sourced information rather than too little. And another consideration with working with a project like this is to consider your triggers and biases. Georgia is the 13th colony and was part of the Confederacy. Georgia is steeped in history that may be uncomfortable and triggering. Many of the records we encounter will make us face our own biases. No matter how we personally feel about parts of Georgia's history, it all must be recorded fairly and equally. No record should be erased because we are uncomfortable. And our discomfort should push us into discourse about what each record means to the state of Georgia then and what it means to the state of Georgia now. But some additional uses: Georgia tourism and unique queries. Georgia is full of historical sites, some older than the country itself. So a query can be used for Georgia tourism. If you are interested in learning more about Georgia's history, this project can be used for tourism. A query can be run for places to visit based on city, county, or region. And this is an image of the GLAM institutions located just in DeKalb County. And since the annual visitor count for 2015 and 2017 for all GPL systems were already in Wikidata, we were able to get a little help from the Wikidata community to graph those counts in another query. Here they are displayed as a line graph. Granted, it's not the best line graph in the world, but you can still type in the URL to see it in action for yourself. To me, it's just neat that this information is out there and readily accessible with no barriers to update, enhance, or enrich the data. Any publicly available and verifiable facts can be added to Wikidata, so feel free to explore. But looking over the project impact, we can see that we accomplished a lot. We now have over 1,900 Georgia NCH organizations in Wikidata. Yay! And a single location on the web for emergency responders to identify organizations in affected areas. We've developed this project to be an open and reusable, and we have a plan for sustainability, so the data in the website can continue to be useful. We had our first in the field test in September with the landfall of Hurricane Sally. In anticipation of heavy rainfall and flooding, members of the Heritage Emergency Response Alliance send out emails to 330 NCH organizations that we had email addresses for in GEMA regions 1, 3, 4, and 7. Thankfully, none of the email organizations requested emergency assistance following the storms, but here it did receive gratitude from organizations for reaching out. From the email blast, we experienced a 9% bounce rate where emails could not be delivered, which is pretty good considering that we did not test any of the emails before this. Not all organizations publicly provide email addresses, so we know that we're not reaching everyone in these regions, but this is a good way to get the word out quickly that emergency assistance is available. For more acute disasters such as a tornado, emergency responders can reach out to organizations on a county by county basis, using the table of all available contact methods. This includes email, phone, Facebook, Twitter, and website forums. We are now following up with the organizations whose emails bounced to see if the organizations are still active. And if so, which email address they would like to provide, if any, for emergency response contacts.
I know that we covered a lot today and we went rather quickly, but I'm very happy to say that in the end, I did get my wish. And so here you can see a map of all of the archives in the state of Georgia with a link to this map at the bottom of the slide. So as we said before, if your organization is missing and you would like to have it included, you can just fill out the submission form on the GaNCH website, or even go into Wikidata and add it yourself. And so with that, we would like to thank you for your time and attention today, and we're happy to take any questions that you have.
Thank you, Cliff and Allison. We'll wait a little bit because we have till 12:15 to take some questions. If you guys have any, go ahead and submit those into the Q&A or chat box.
I know that while we're waiting for folks to type out their questions, that I'm sure many folks are going through and checking to see if their organization is in Wikidata and showing up on the map properly. So I know that that's, if it were me, that would be the first thing that I would do. So I know that that adds on a couple extra minutes while everyone checks out their own entry on the site.
Hey, Cliff. So it looks like we do have a question from Mary Willoughby. Any ideas for our next steps, follow-up projects on this data set for you or others?
Right now, we're just waiting to see how the first year annual update goes. So that's going to happen in the spring, where the student workers at Galileo and GPLS will send out the blast email and sort of look at updating the data set. I'm kind of curious to see who self-submits and basically says, hey, you missed us. You know, we have a museum, we have a gallery, we have an organization, we didn't get in, can you make sure to add us too? And actually, I've been in recent talks with my partner who works in mental health, and he wants to basically develop something like this for mental health resources across the state. So I'll be kind of interested to see if this translates the same way to mental health as it did to cultural heritage organizations.
There's a second question here. Do you have a secondary host for the website in case Galileo gets taken out by the disaster?
That is a good question. No, we are sort of relying on Galileo's own redundancy measures, which I'm sure are quite robust. You know, I'm sure that they don't have their, you know, servers all in one single room, you know, at risk. I'm sure there's some sort of remote component, but also we rely on the backup and redundancy of something as large as the Wikimedia community has for their servers. And so if Wikidata itself is a little bit slow or unavailable, then we can use the Galileo site, and vice versa. If the Galileo site goes down, we can just run the queries ourselves on Wikidata itself in order to view the results. So I think having them in two separate systems is as much redundancy as we built in right now. It's a good question though.
Just a comment from Mandy Mastrovida. This project will be so great to use to do outreach for underrepresented archives once organizations begin adding themselves to the list. So I agree too. I went and I looked at the list for Clark County for where I'm at in Athens, and it was great to see that not only are our libraries on there throughout the county, but also many of our historical organizations and even nonprofits like Cine, our nonprofit film and theater group, as well as some of our historic preservation, as well as some historic cemeteries. So it was good to see.
Yeah, there's certainly an issue with the fuzzy borders around what we included and what we didn't include. One of the challenges that Allison and I ran into was around high school libraries. Because originally when we were looking at the Galileo data set, there's a lot of private or independent schools that exist throughout the state that have their own libraries that make use of Galileo. And so they're in the Galileo pool, but you know, there came a point where we were sort of running out of time and we were like, well, do we include, is every high school library going to include unique enough cultural content that we have to fear for that loss? Now, there is some, obviously, with things like yearbooks and the like, but just because we had limited time and limited resources, we excluded them for this first pass. And so if you are a school librarian or a school archivist and we missed you, my apologies, but please self-submit. We'll make sure to include you. And since Virginia's here as well, I will say, unfortunately, we didn't include a lot of corporate archives because they weren't included on the list. So
Yeah, I wasn't gonna say anything.
so if you are an archivist at a corporate archives, do let us know and we'll make sure to get you included.
Yeah, there's a comment here from Alicia. I'm so excited that I found my library on the list. Plus, I found an organization that I did not know existed in my county. If I ever get questions about something that I may not have in my library's archive, I could reach out to one of the organizations on your list. That is so great.
That's very heartwarming to hear. That's wonderful.
Oh, and one more. So Kathy Miller said, I would love to see if I can take the model of GaNCH and apply to creating a better access port for SAA's directory of archival organizations. Not in here, obviously, but I'm excited to see the possibility of creating a better one-stop shop for finding information about archival organizations across the US.
Absolutely. It actually would be relatively easy to search for those using some of the queries that we built. You can just run the query and then follow the export instructions to see what it looks like on Wikidata's end. And it's relatively easy to substitute variables and say, well, rather than looking in Georgia, let's look in Alabama or Florida or what have you to see if other states have the kind of coverage that we now have.
Yeah, Christine Weissman commented, we'd also like to include more local government record centers in the future phase too.
Yeah, we unfortunately did run out of time before we were able to include the clerks of court of Georgia. So each county has their own clerk of court who stores the records locally. And we just ran out of time and we couldn't get a data set from them fast enough to get it included. So when I have time, I'll loop back, scrape their websites, ingest it all in, and that'll be a few more 100 records in the tool.
Yeah, I know from our surrounding counties and our more rural areas, not only do they have the clerk of courts taking care of kind of the more modern records, but oftentimes they've turned over the historic records to volunteer organizations that don't always have a robust online presence. So it'd be interesting to see how we could gather that information as well.
That is interesting. I did not know that.
All right. Thank you, Cliff and Allison. Any more questions before we end the session today?
I'm not seeing any, but if anyone would like to reach out to us, feel free.
Yes, and thank you so much, Cliff and Allison, for your presentation today. Again, we want to thank our presenters this morning for sharing with us and everyone for your questions. Please feel free to follow up with them, again, if you have additional questions or comments.